Today, I'm talking to David Heacock, the founder and CEO of Filterbuy. He's someone who walked away from Wall Street to build a vertically integrated, tech powered manufacturing brand in rural Alabama. What really stood out to me is how he's not just scaling product, he's scaling culture, systems, and people. We're going to get into AI in the factory, how to hire for tech fluency, and why procurement is the hidden engine of American manufacturing. And with that, I'll hand it over to my co host, Friddy, who's going to dig into David's story and strategy even further.
Hey, David. Nice to meet us. Yeah, I think we want to get right to it. I know there's a lot of content out there already on how you started Filterbuy and some of the challenges and your move, but I really wanted to jump in and see what made you stay in Talladega, not necessarily a candidate hotspot, not necessarily a manufacturing hotspot. So what were your thoughts there, and what made you ultimately stay and double down and vertically integrate there?
Yeah, I think I take a little bit of issue of it not being a manufacturing hotspot. Alabama definitely has a rich manufacturing history, and I grew up seeing that. My grandfather started a manufacturing business out of World War II, and I really saw the kind of rise and ultimate decline of that, and that was definitely formative for me in my childhood. And basically, when I was looking for a product that I could manufacture competitively in the U.S., using existing infrastructure, Talladega, where I grew up, certainly came to mind because there was a lot of underutilized infrastructure that had effectively been left to rot. And I saw that as an opportunity because if you can repurpose that into productive use, you can do it much cheaper than building it from scratch.
And how big is Filterbuy now?
We will do about $280 million of revenue this year and have about 1,000 employees in the U.S.
Awesome. Most of them are in Talladega, right? But you have some people working for you remote, is that right?
We have 7 facilities, 3 manufacturing facilities and 4 distribution centers. So we manufacture in Talladega, New Kensington, Pennsylvania, another old steel town that was actually famous from Alcoa's original headquarters, and Ogden, Utah. And then we have 4 distribution centers. About 300 or so employees are in Talladega, and then the rest are spread out. And we have about 50 or 60 remote corporate employees.
And I think that's interesting, right? Because remote has come and gone for the most part, but I think you had that remote set up even before COVID. Is that right?
Going into COVID, we were only in Talladega. So we started in 2019. We only had 1 location, and I was based in New York City at the time and had a few employees that worked with me in New York. And that was the extent of it. We didn't have a robust management team at that point, and we expanded a lot during COVID. And because of that, we were remote first because it just made sense. People were not hiring in person, and I in fact was in the process of moving, and it was a complex time. And so we've largely kept that remote workforce and continued to grow it because it's just how we evolved. But I know we have not actually gone back to forcing in person. We do have like pockets, like we have in Atlanta and West Palm where I am, we have some corporate employees, but we do not require people to come into the office by and large.
Yeah. Do you feel like it gives you an advantage when looking for talent, having that option to say, hey, to really get those high performers, those A talent, to give them the remote option?
Yeah, undeniably. I actually tried in the last few years or a few years ago to bring more in-house. I thought that was something that would be beneficial, and it was largely a failed experiment, to be honest with you. And it's precisely because of that. If you want the best person for a specific role, by forcing them to be in a geographic location, you're limiting your talent pool quite significantly. So it definitely, in my experience, has been better having a broader search.
When you're saying there was some lessons learned there or a failed experiment, can you tell us a little bit more about that? I think that's super relevant for our audience.
Well, we have an office in Atlanta that we opened a few years ago with the idea of making that kind of a corporate headquarters. And we went out and started hiring for specifically that office. And so often we ran into problems where potential employees were looking for remote options and actually did not want to be in an office and would just exclude you from a search if you were going to force in office. Or we would find that maybe we were looking for a specific niche role that not a lot of people in the Atlanta area we were really excited about, but then we would broaden the search and find somebody that was perfect. They just happened to live in a different zip code or a different part of the country. And so we ultimately started making exceptions to our regional rule. And then once you start making exceptions, then it's pretty hard to go to new people and say, we're not going to make an exception for you. And so it just really didn't really work.
What roles do you think can be remote, and what roles where you say have to be on site, either at the manufacturing side or the warehouse side?
Yeah, so like the vast majority of our roles are still in person because the vast majority of our roles are related to physical manufacturing. And I think that anybody that is in physical manufacturing or management for physical manufacturing needs to be on site. Like even if there are theoretically some manager roles that would not need to be on site as much, I think from a cultural perspective, it's unfair to have positions where managers are excluded from having to be there physically. So anyone that's related to a manufacturing specific role is in person full time. Really anything that's not direct manufacturing though, in my opinion, can be remote. And in our case, largely, as I look at our marketing team, our procurement team actually is largely remote. Our customer service is remote. Our finance is largely remote. So, all of those functions certainly can have a remote workforce in my experience.
Have you any lessons learned then how to manage a remote workforce? And is it different than managing people in person?
It's absolutely different. And getting the right cultural fit is harder remote because you don't have as many touch points when you're pure remote. And I think that we've had a lot of trial and error trying to get that right. Having quarterly in-person meetings, I think, is extremely important. And it's something that we, in most of our remote departments, we do have that. So I think getting people together on some type of regular cadence for the most important teams, like our sales teams, I believe we do it quarterly. The bigger teams, we generally do quarterly. And then some other functions we may do once a year or twice a year, just depending on the type of role. But I do think some in-person interaction is extremely important. And I think that having a strong corporate set of corporate value structure is extremely important, and making sure that when you are talking with employees and when you're giving reviews to employees, that it's all framed in the context of your corporate values and your corporate culture. And the thing that people miss within that oftentimes is if you really have values as a company, you have to be willing to hire and terminate based off of those values. And there have to be, like, even if you have employees that may be high performers by and large, but are not consistent with your corporate values or your culture, you have to be willing to move on from them. And I think that's a lesson that we've learned the hard way in certain cases, but I've gotten much better with. And I think that really having a strong set of values that you actually embody, that the leadership of your company embodies, and that you are constantly having conversations around is extremely important, is even more important in a remote first environment.
Yeah, and I feel like we've talked to a lot of companies that say corporate culture is important, but then a lot of them struggle to define what that corporate culture looks like and how they identify that in candidates and how they hire for that. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and how do you create an effective corporate culture that doesn't just say communication is important?
Yeah, I think it's multifaceted and multi-layered. And one piece of advice I would give to anyone that is watching this or thinking about it is reading the book Traction, which is like an operating system for businesses that talks a lot about this particular subject, and was really an inspiration when I went through this process a couple of years ago. I think that I am advantaged in that I own the business and I'm very operationally involved in the business, and the culture feeds down from me. And I think that being one person that is obviously very passionate about the business, that's an advantage that we have, and that I am able to set a very defined cultural environment that I live and breathe every single day. And I think that by showing that and then ultimately putting that on paper, which I did after reading the book Traction, and really put down a list of a mission statement and a set of values that are extremely important to me personally and to the success of our business. And then, so articulating that, like living it, articulating it, and then rewarding people based off of how they are able to implement that themselves. And so it's really that three-pronged approach is you have to be able to model it, you have to be able to articulate what your expectations are, and then you have to incentivize against that. And where people oftentimes miss is they don't get at least one of those right, and then the whole thing breaks down if you don't have that whole ecosystem.
I'm curious now, what are some of your culture pillars?
It's like a bias to action is an example of one of them, meaning that I think that shortening the time from when you know what you're supposed to do or how to solve a problem or the steps that you need to take, and then actually taking those steps is one of the core tenets of our business and core tenets to our success. And so an example of how you would coach around that is if a problem arose and it was an obvious solution, we know what that solution is, then you can judge whether or not the people that were in charge of that took action against that, or did they delay it and come up with excuses for it not to happen. And based off of how people behave, you're able to coach them against that. And so that would be an example. We have 7 that are similar to that unwavering customer service and resilience through difficult times and things like that are extremely important to me, important to how our business has evolved, and give us the ability to communicate with our employees when we are achieving these or when maybe we're lacking. And it allows us to reframe problems that arise and that kind of get out from the nitty gritty of that problem and talk about more of a cultural dynamic about how we as a company approach problem solving. And that's why it can be so valuable.
Absolutely. Do you have any tricks when interviewing on how to identify culture fit in an interview process?
I would be lying if I said that it was a science. I definitely feel like it's more of an art, and I feel like we've gotten better and I've gotten better as we go through it. But we all make mistakes, and you have to be okay with that. One of the things that I think is extremely important is being very open about the culture of both the company and the dynamic of the group or department that you're hiring this person into. I think that oftentimes people or companies like to present the fairy tale version of what life is like within a business. And I actually prefer the opposite. I like to present where I think we have problems and where we need to focus on doing better, and hiring people that understand what our mission is as a business, what we stand for, maybe some of the things that we like, why we're hiring them, like what are the problems that we're hiring them to help us to solve. And then the people that get really excited about that are the people that are going to have the higher probability of success, in my opinion. But it comes from being really transparent and not trying to hide or trying to present something that doesn't exist, because people are smart. They know that they're not coming into a perfectly well-oiled machine. Oftentimes, especially higher level hires, they're being hired for a reason. So if you can articulate that and get them excited about solving those problems in the context of your culture, then that's really where I've had the most success.
Yeah, and I know that's something we had from you when we were working on the VP search, is really a very specific set of projects and problems you wanted that person to tackle. And I think from our experience, the roles that are clearly defined, where the hiring managers are on the same page and they know, hey, this is what we want to achieve by hiring for this role, are typically the most successful roles. The roles where we are getting a standard job description, right? And it's saying, hey, it's a supply chain manager, but the team internally isn't aligned, and maybe they haven't thought about, okay, what are really some of the challenges we're looking to solve by hiring this person. Then you go through an exploration process, right, in the interview stages where you maybe get feedback from one hiring manager that says, I really like this candidate, they have a strong procurement experience. And then the next manager says, I don't like this candidate, they're lacking on the logistics side. Going into a hiring process with a clearly defined set of parameters of what am I looking for, I think is very important in making right hiring decisions, and also making sure that right internally everybody is aligned with what you're looking to achieve. And Yeah, that's something we see a lot, what companies struggle. And I know we had good success when working with you because we did have that specific projects that you were looking for. And I think one of those was to scale automation. How is that process going, and what are some of the lessons learned there?
Well, it's a ever going process because things are continually changing, and there are always ways to optimize and improve. But we really started the automation process 4 or 5 years ago now, and every year we're coming up with ways to automate more and to use AI more and the tools that are coming down so rapidly. We hired CJ, our VP of Ops, who we hired through you, and he came with a deep automation experience. That was actually one of the things that we were looking for when we did our job search. And he's definitely spearheaded a lot of these projects that have allowed us to get so much more efficient. And we have a pipeline of automation both within the warehouse and, even more interestingly to me, in our data analytics team that allows us to make decisions as a business, whether that be operational decisions or marketing decisions or financial decisions. And that's one of the areas where we've really been investing a lot lately, because we see AI as being such a great PhD level analyst if you're able to feed it the right data and ask the right questions. And so where we still see the human capital need that is more valuable than ever is the people that are capable of bringing in that data, cleaning it, understanding it, working with people like CJ in our operations to get clean data and the right data, and then asking the right questions about, hey, how can we look at this differently? How can we optimize it? What can we be shifting? And that is one of the areas that I've seen the most operational leverage in the last year.
Yeah. And I think something that scares a lot of people, right? Is AI going to take over my job? Is automation going to take my job? Do you have any advice there for people who are saying, hey, do I need to start looking into different fields? Or what would you say? If you wanted to make sure you have a job for the next 5 to 10 years, what would you focus on?
AI won't take your job, but people who use it will. And so ultimately, to me, what that means is you need to embrace it and learn it, learn how to use it to make yourself and your business more productive. And that is ultimately going to be the outcome, is that the world will get more productive. And that is always the way technology cycles play out. I think that the people that are looking for investors in AI or trying to sell it at scale paint a overly optimistic picture of what AI is capable of doing. And it is such a magic tool if you know how to use it right, but it's ultimately how you use it is ultimately the differentiator between whether or not it's going to be successful or not. And it's people that are using it that are going to be the enablers of those productivity lifts. And so the people that really embrace it and learn how to make themselves more productive are going to find that they have more opportunities in the future. And it's the people that are just running away from it scared or trying to avoid it, they're going to find themselves in trouble. But Ed, I think over time, just when farming equipment came out and 90% of the people were in agriculture, all of a sudden they're like, oh, this is Armageddon. What are people going to do? Yeah. And we as a society find productive ways to use that technology and to do other productive things. My deep suspicion is that's what will happen with AI, but it's impossible to know how that looks 50 years out.
Yeah, that's actually a discussion I had 7-8 years ago, and I was called somewhat crazy when I was telling people that there's going to be a lot more content creators. And I've been proven to be right on that one. I felt like we went from farming to manufacturing to service. And I thought the next one was going to be really that content creation, because it gives companies a platform, and that decentralized content creation where it's not 5 big TV stations, but more decentralized, and where companies eventually going to place their products in there, people are going to consume more. So you're going to create that reinforcing cycle of the companies now are more effective and efficient, and the profits might be higher. What are they doing with it? They want to place their product in front of more people. And that can be achieved by, I think. So I think one outcome of that AI and automation advance could be that people like us are talking more to each other in podcasts and all sorts of social media content. So I was called crazy back then, but I think looking at it now, I think we're getting pretty close. In terms of AI, do you have any specific projects? I know you mentioned the data analytics, and is there anything AI has surprised you, what it can do, what wasn't maybe possible 3-5 years ago, right? We had the automated warehouses, we had the robots going up and down picking maybe products, but is there anything in AI that you've seen in the last year or two where you're saying, wow, I didn't see that coming?
That I didn't see it coming. I don't know that I have a great aha moment for you with it. What I think is the most amazing is we have a big development team, code-based development team that runs all of our custom ERP system that we built. And I just see the productivity that we're able to get out of that same team now, how much quicker we're able to push projects, push code, and iterate at a level that I could have only dreamed of when I started the business. And, I think that what we're going to find, like one of the nuanced competitive advantages that we as a business have had is that we built our own ERP system from the beginning that is purpose-built, purpose-driven for our specific use case. And we have a complicated distribution model and manufacturing model. We do a lot where multiple businesses rolled up into one. And the only way that we were able to do that is because I basically built our own ERP system to allow it. What I think AI is really going to enable is for more and more people to do that. And I think what you're going to find is that there's so much value that will be unlocked once people are able to build software solutions that are specific for their business rather than trying to plug into a SAP system or some big enterprise system that you see the most big companies use. I think this is probably slightly controversial, but I believe this before AI, and now I see AI and how that is going to enable it for so many more people, in my opinion. And it's something that I would encourage, especially like smaller and medium-sized businesses, to really consider, because I think that we're going to flip the switch where historically it's like you have to make applications that work to these antiquated, older legacy systems that actually create a lot of inefficiencies to be able to try to make them work. Every single implementation of these, I've seen that. And I think we'll be shocked at how much value is unlocked and how much opportunity is unlocked by unblocking that. And I think that AI is the tool, the mechanism that's actually going to allow that. And I think, I don't know as much about the specific roles that you recruit, but when I talk with recruiters for larger companies, so much of the focus is around these kind of people supporting these legacy systems more or less. And I think that is going to be an area where people that learn really how to use AI, they're going to be able to unlock so much value, create so much value. And that's something that I'm super excited about seeing.
And I think, like you said, it's going to give the smaller and mid-sized businesses really an advantage over the large companies, because they're just going to be so much slower in switching to anything like that. And that might not even be possible. So as a small and mid-sized business, that really could give them an advantage over larger organizations to stay ahead and be more agile, right, and be more efficient.
100%. And so that's why I bring it up, is if you're that smaller mid-sized business, this is an area where you really want to be thinking about that and hiring people that are aligned with building tools in that framework and aligned with saying, okay, we're not going to just do things in the legacy way. We're going to rethink our systems and say, if we wanted to do this in the most efficient way, how would that look? Would that be possible with AI tools? How can we go and figure this out? Those are the questions I encourage my team to ask, and where I think a lot of value will be unlocked.
Yeah. And I think I watched one of your clips here where you talked about how important that next day delivery is for you. And I'm assuming because it's somewhat of a commodity product. So if you aren't able to get it into people's hands quickly, they have other options of getting it. And I think to your point, I'm here in Madison, Alabama. We have 2 Amazon distribution centers, and for some reason my shipping times are now 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. And yeah, I'm looking for other solutions because I'm saying, hey, I'm not waiting 5 days for Amazon to get it to me. Your distribution center is half a mile away. You have taught me that I can have it next day. Now don't take that away from me.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a whole discussion that we could probably do a multi-hour podcast on. It's something I'm certainly passionate about. But the reality is, and where I think there's a lot of opportunity, is Amazon, in my experience, is great for everyday goods. They do this, and like they have that warehouse is probably stocked with the 90,000 items that everybody always buys. But the reality of commerce is that there are millions and millions of items that people are ordering on any given day, either as a business or as a person. And I think that is where there still is a tremendous amount of opportunity. I think that in the oversized product scope, which is where we operate, that's one of the things I'm most excited about for us as a business and how we're evolving, because even Amazon is not set up to really do that at the oversized items at scale. And it's really just, they can't do everything. Like one company can't do everything. And so I think there's tremendous opportunities in shortening those delivery speeds. And we have a partnership that we announced publicly now with a UPS company called Roadie, where we're offering same-day delivery in certain markets and next-day delivery to almost all of the country. And I really think that more and more third-party logistics companies and other businesses really should be focused on that delivery speed. And I think that people are not as focused on it. Businesses are not as focused on it as they should be. It's such a huge leverage point, in my opinion, in my experience.
Yeah, and I know we're close to time here. So one last question, if you have time for it.
Yeah, go for it.
With the recent talks about tariffs, right, and bringing manufacturing back to America, are you impacted at all by the tariffs? And how do you prepare for that uncertainty? And what is your take on what are some of the challenges of manufacturing in America?
Yeah, we're fortunate that at least in our current core business, all of our products are made in the U.S. and use U.S. sourced components. We're very fortunate for that, and it was part of the reason why I chose this industry to begin with. But in terms of challenges, what I think is important is while it would be great for me or anyone to say we're only going to source using U.S. components and manufacture everything in the U.S., even if we had the ability to manufacture the products in the U.S., the raw material and component pieces, the infrastructure that is required to do all of that, we've largely gutted over the last 30 years. And it's not the type of thing that you just go out and you put together. I mean, and for full disclosure, we're looking to get into some adjacent product lines that I know there is no chance we will be able to manufacture fully in the U.S. And when I go down the supply chain of the components that feed it, and you're thinking like little niche rubber molds and just all kinds of things you can't imagine, where somebody has to have the skill set to actually build the dies that then they get poured into, and then the right machinery to do all this stuff that's very complex, and you need lots of specialized engineers to be able to run these types of businesses. And in the U.S., it would be impossible, as we sit here today, to find them. And I think that is where people misunderstand this conversation. It's not I think a lot of people would like to manufacture more in the U.S., but until you have the supply chain for all the components and all the institutional knowledge that you need to run those supply chains, which we do not have, and it takes generations, unfortunately, to build, it's just not realistic in every case. I think there are cases where it is realistic, and we are actively doing that. But I think that it's also, unfortunately, many product lines are in areas where it's just not realistic in the coming decade, at least. And past that, you would need big investment now to be able to do it past then. And I don't see that really happening, unfortunately.
Yeah, and there's probably products where it's better off if we just source them. And there's certainly products that are advantageous to bring back the manufacturing capacities to the US. So I think finding that balance in the end of, okay, Do we need to make sneakers in the US? Maybe not. Do we need to some of our more electronic components and maybe more critical components? Is there advantage of manufacturing those in the US?
I was going to ask David, could you give our listeners a website or social media to follow along with your journey as well as Filterbuy's journey?
Yeah, so I'm David Filterbuy everywhere. YouTube is where we put in the most effort. We release a video every Friday about different business topic, and generally our target audience is budding entrepreneurs generally that are interested in building what we deem a boring business, which is maybe an everyday product or service that is not super sexy like a AI chatbot, but is something that people need. And that's something I'm passionate about, and building businesses around that. And every Friday I do my best to release a video sharing some tips and tricks on how to do it. So that's where you can find me, but I'm David Filterbuy everywhere.
My favorite feature about Filterbuy is your subscription model. I don't have to remember to change out my air filter. It just shows up at my house, and when it shows up, I know I'm popping in a new one.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate filterbuy.com that you buy your filter today and get it tomorrow more often than not. So it's definitely check us out if you're in need of an HVAC filter.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.